What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Go Work Wherever podcast or the Work Wherever podcast. We're still working on that brand because we have rebranded. We're no longer the Innovare podcast. We have moved past the innovation portion. If you guys enjoyed the Innovare podcast and you liked hanging out with us, we liked hanging out with you too. You can still catch all those old episodes. But here today in the Work Wherever podcast, we have Nate Hirschberg, a former Virginia resident that I just found out, and he fled the greatest commonwealth in the Union to go elsewhere. And he is of Stag Mountain Properties, and we'll welcome in Nate first off, and then we'll get into what you do. But welcome on into the Work Wherever podcast.
Oh, thanks, Roy. Appreciate it, man. We just need to get you down here to Charleston, and you'll see the light, man. You won't be tired. You won't miss shoveling snow. I promise you that.
Yeah, yes, I hate shoveling snow. It's not my favorite thing to do. Yeah, out in Funchester, you got plenty of space out there. You did have plenty of space out there out in Funchester, but I do agree, dude. The snow. They say, 4 seasons and all that other. Oh, we have 4 seasons up here. Yeah, we do. But the snow sucks.
Yeah.
So you were very smart to get the hell out. So now I could talk about everything that you do and who you are and completely butcher that. But how about we just start this out to where we talk about who you are and what you do, and then we'll get into how we can help, and we'll get into the topic of remote.
Let's do it, man. Yeah, no. So I appreciate you having me on here. Nate Hirschberg, here in Charleston, South Carolina, and I'm in the real estate space. So I primarily fix and flip, and I do that fully virtual, which is how we connect on that. And people hear how fix and flip fully virtual. They usually don't go together. So it's a cool thing that I've been able to do, and I'm happy to share some of the tips and strategies that taught me how to be able to do that successfully. This year, my team and I, which is fairly skeleton, but we'll do about 70 to 80 flips fully virtual, and that's across a couple of different markets: Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, and Tennessee mostly, with some stragglers in there. And then do a little bit of commercial real estate, have some rental properties and some commercial rental properties, and the final vertical to my business, if you will, is I love giving back. It's a huge passion of mine. So I've been able to start an education platform that has over 30 people that have successfully started their real estate career through investing into real estate, and a handful of them have been able to quit their W-2 jobs. So it's a little bit about me and what I'm up to right now.
Nice, man. So you're right. First off, the flipping industry is not one that people think about as a remote business or a remote organization. So I get pushback a lot from people that say, "Oh, remote's not for every industry, and every industry is different, and there are certain industries that'll just you have to be hands-on, right?" Which real estate and flipping homes is one of the ones that I get of people bringing up a lot.
Yeah.
But you've managed to do it. There's others that I've talked to that have managed to do it. So first off, before we get into the how you were able to do it and the things that you're able to do and the things that you've put in place, what was the decision that ultimately led you to saying, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make this a remote organization.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a couple different catalysts, if you will, but really the number one thing was COVID.
Right.
When things shut down, people stopped letting us into their homes to look at them, to buy them, and we just were forced to pivot a lot of our acquisition structure, if you will, because I do all direct to seller marketing. I am a licensed real estate agent, but for this, I go directly to the seller and ask them if they would like a cash offer for their home. And it just was like 1 week into it, they're like, well, let's just see what happens. I'm not letting anybody in. And that fast forward, it was, 5 weeks. And that's a conversation in itself. But we were like, well, this can't continue to happen. So we just got creative and said, hey, how can we do a lot of this stuff virtual? And we just started at the front. I'm just like, let's start with one thing at a time. And as a team, we're going to build this out. This will not suffer our business. And in fact, the result was, spoiler alert, it actually improved our business, and we became more profitable. We had more time, and we were able to scale a lot more. So I think the catalyst for me amongst many of them. But the where it put my back against the wall as a leader of the organization was COVID, and I can't let things slow down.
Yeah. So that was kind of the big driver of the last couple of years, right? Is prior to 2020, remote organizations were not the norm. And
Right.
a lot of organizations kind of saw it as a luxury to say, I could do that remotely, but well, that would be nice, Whereas 2020 forced us to do it for one. Like there was no real choice. If you wanted to stay in business and you wanted to stay productive and stay working, you either thought you're going to just wait out the restrictions, or you had to get creative. And so
Yep.
that was a lot of the innovation that had to take place, which we talked a lot about that on previous seasons of this podcast, where just how businesses were innovating. But now you have the choice to return to work and do business the way that you were before, or you can choose to stay remote. And it sounds like you're choosing to stay. You're now, you say, look, we were more profitable. We're able to service a larger service area. We're able to do things that we weren't able to do. And so this is a choice now to remain remote, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, before that, my team and I, we were only flipping in Charleston, South Carolina. We had majority of the market share here, which for anyone watching to quantify that, we were doing about 30 to 40 flips a year. For this little small Charleston proper metropolitan area is pretty good. But then being able to then go wider with the procedures and the risk mitigation operational procedures that we put into place, then that's what took us from that 30 to 40 to hopefully, keep trending up closer to the 100 mark. Profits don't change, timelines are actually faster, and you can then recruit better talent because, hey, I can recruit someone that lives in DC that might be a better, operations manager or something like that, whereas before they had to be right here in front of me.
So let's start with the challenges, right? Before we get into, it sounds like there's a ton of benefits that you're just jumping on, which I want to hammer those home. But I want to set the table with the challenges first, because working remote is not the easiest thing to do on the planet, right? It takes major infrastructure changes, or at the very least, conversations and an understanding internally inside your business that things are going to run differently.
Yeah.
So what were the initial challenges, COVID aside? Obviously there was COVID, and we can talk about COVID, but once you decided, this is the way that things are going to be and we have to do this, what were some initial challenges that you saw that you immediately had to overcome?
Well, one of the biggest things was when I told some folks that I was going to start doing virtual. I'm like, guys, I'm not waiting this out. I'm going virtual. And people were like, you're insane. Like, you're crazy. How are you going to buy these houses without ever stepping foot in them? How are you going to manage these contractors without ever doing a site visit? Like, you might lose your ass. And you might be right, but I'm at least going to try, instead of sitting on my hands here. So challenges was 100% labor management. Anyone in the space or has done any renovations knows contractors and labor workers, unfortunately, they're just not the most reliable people. So that was a number one struggle. But then also going through the sales cycle, I mean, that had to completely change. We strived ourselves on meeting with the sellers of these properties, building tons of rapport in person. And because of that, we were super successful. And now we're not going to meet them. This is all building rapport over the phone. This is all getting pictures of the property to determine the condition of the home, and then build scopes of work for our contractors based on pictures, and then putting some risk mitigation on there by confirming details with like home inspections and things like that. I would say that was the number one struggle, was just managing not only the difference in that sales cycle, taking it from in person to virtual, but also then after you buy the property, well, now that's cool and all, but now you got to flip it. And now you have a whole crew to manage and trust that they're doing what you want them to do, to your perfection level, and that it's going to turn out good.
Yeah, so I bought a house over the last couple. I'm one of the crazies who went out and purchased a house and sold a house during, this whole remote everything. right?
Yeah.
So, some of the things that you're talking about, I saw, and I enjoy. So I also bought a house prior to all this, and remember how much paperwork there is and how many steps and how honestly horrible of a process it was to purchase a house and go through that whole thing prior to, right? So
Yeah.
for reference, I purchased my first house in 2014. So remote anything real estate was I mean, Redfin existed, and that was about the extent of purchasing a home remotely, right?
Sure.
Fast forward to I purchased in 2021. That process was largely streamlined and digital. Whereas if I wanted to see a house, they have virtual walkthroughs of
Oh
the
yeah.
house. They have Zooms you could do with an agent, so the agent walks through the house. So you could do that. I assume you're taking when you're talking about risk mitigation and understanding some of these things. Are you working with agents who do walkthroughs, or like what? How far are you pushing this remote technology of what we have today in taking a look at some of those risks? Because when you say that you're not seeing the property, you are. You're just not banging on the walls, right?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So I'm leveraging multiple facets there, right? So first, kind of pulling back the onion there, the first thing I do is I ask, pictures from the seller, and I'm very specific about what I want: interior, exterior, under the sinks, electric panels, hot water tanks, HVAC units. I get all that. Assuming that comes back in good condition about what they told me it was going to look like, then I'll then take it to the next step, which is ordering it's called a 4-point home inspection. They're not looking for cosmetic defects because, let's face it, the most of the properties I'm buying, they have a lot of those, and I'm okay with that because that's how I get a good discount and can make money. But what I'm looking for is, HVAC unit. Is there foundation issues? Is the roof about to cave in? Big things that are going to really adjust your budget and you want to know about. And then also, what I'll do is I'll send the pictures from the seller to the inspector and say, hey, can you cross compare to make sure that these weren't taken like 10 years ago? And now today it's a lot different. And then the final thing that I'll do, if things just kind of aren't lining up, is I am a big fan of relationships and boots on the ground. I leverage real estate agents heavily. I make it worth their while. I'll compensate them. But if the seller is kind of being shady and the home inspector can't get in there, maybe I'll send a real estate agent by and we'll do a Zoom tour or a FaceTime tour. And then I'll also leverage them on the renovation side of things, saying, hey, can you pop by once a week and just take a video walkthrough, upload it to a Google Drive for me, and I'll look at it and just make sure things are tracking the right way.
Yeah. The amount of processes that we have now that are digitally where you can communicate with things like that, like you can jump on a Microsoft Teams meeting or whatever and see the video through, or share a document link out. It's like, hey, drop some pictures in the cloud for me and then I'll take a look at them.
Right.
But one of the things that I loved the most about the buying process was the other side of it, the customer experience, right? Because I was the buyer, right? You're doing something totally different than the experience that I went through, right? Because you're looking at it from a business perspective, but
Sure.
from an end user customer perspective, I have everything in an app now,
Yeah.
or I have videos. I have you know digital signatures that I can place on things that, like I said before, like the process of paperwork and getting paper out of a business process, that was my favorite thing about the buying process. And that's a step that businesses can take right now. If you're not in the real estate business and you're listening to Nate and you're like, yeah, but I'm in the plumbing industry. Okay, how can you change your customer experience and customer buying experience so that you eliminate some of that stupid paperwork? Because
Oh, sure.
that's the biggest, to me, that's the biggest thing. Now I'm the customer side of things, right? So in terms of communicating with your team, did you see a lapse in communication maybe in the beginning, or is it still going on, or was there any sort of lapse in communication, or did you see that you guys were communicating more regularly, or what was the communication side of this?
The cool thing is, and to your point, I mean, the experience now, to backtrack really quick, the experience now is so much better. And no joke, we get feedback from people that said, hey, we had a lot of phone calls with people wanting to buy our house, but you guys were willing to do it virtual. And we just really didn't want to meet with anybody. It was
Yeah.
convenient. You made it simple. It was streamlined. And I use the analogy of Amazon. Amazon might not always have the cheapest prices, but because it's so freaking convenient,
Mm-hmm.
people use them. And I try to kind of mirror that model there. But in regards to communication internally, we were fully virtual that way always. I never had a brick and mortar business. I don't want to say anti corporate America, but I'm just not looking to have this massive building where hundreds of employees come. I think that I always want my employees to have freedom. And I also want to be able to recruit from outside where I'm at because there's so much talent out there. Why would I take my talent pool that's here in the entire continental US or even outside? Because I have folks that work for me outside the US and shrink it down to Charleston, South Carolina. That's shooting myself in the foot.
So with that, have you been able to attract other talent from other businesses with being remote, not having a brick and mortar, or have you seen trends in that, or are people looking to be remote? Because I feel like you're in a unique position here where you're dealing with like two different sides of the table, right? You're dealing with the trade workers that are saying like, hey man, this is a big change, and your internal team that are saying, hey, this is a big change for me. Like, what do you mean I have to be remote? So were there more people looking for that? The other side would be the buyer, the home buyer. You have to convince them that this process, that, or you, the buyer, and the seller,
Right.
that whole relationship, the buyer seller relationship. And then there's the business side of things where you're communicating with your team to say, hey, we got this. So how receptive was the business side of things, the people that you're working with, those relationships, were they as receptive to being remote?
Oh my gosh, over the moon. Yeah.
Yeah.
They were like, we don't have to go to an office. Yeah. And I ended up picking up folks from other industries, insurance industry. One of our acquisitions guy, Devin, he came from the healthcare recruiting world and just really didn't. I mean, they'd had baseline knowledge about real estate, but it was one of their first ventures into real estate, and came into this and just kind of killed it because they understood how to build rapport with people, how a sales cycle works, and stuff like that. I can teach people about real estate. They just came in with the fundamentals. And as far as the labor or excuse me, the buyer seller relationship, I think it comes back to communication. If you start the conversation and you're perceiving as if you're going to do all this in person and you never set the stage, then sure, there's probably going to be some bumps on the road. But I am one of the first things we do is we tell people what we're not going to do. If I'm on the phone with someone, everyone wants to start with, here's what I'm going to do for you. Let me tell you what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to waste your time. I'm probably not going to come to the property. I'm not going to string this thing along, but here's what I need in return, and set that stage immediately. And you're going to get a lot of good respect because people respect that. But then people know what the next steps are, and they're more likely to stay on timelines and stay on track with those.
Did you grab those processes and automate them? Was that part of the initial process, or like what was your starting point there where you're like, we're creating this remote experience
Yeah.
and we're going to turn it into what? How did you do that? Was that where you focused your first intent? Like, what was the starting point where you're like, how can we do this? Are we going to just automate as much as possible? Are we going to do this through email? Like, what was the starting point to say, hey, this is how we're going to build this remote business?
I started from the top and just worked myself to the bottom. And I said, I have two ways I can go about doing this. I can try to do it all at once, and I have probably a 50-50 chance of it succeeding or blowing up in smoke. Or I can take it slow. Is production going to go down for a little bit? Probably so. But I can do one process at a time and just make damn sure that that process is bulletproof. And that's the way I went. And because of that, did I still have to go back and redo some things? Yeah. But I also was able to really, really get things pretty accurate right out of the gate.
Yeah. So I'm a big process guy where
Yeah.
I think that any remote business or any business in general, really, should have systems and processes in place. Whether you're physically filling out a checklist with a pen and pencil and then handing it to somebody, or doing it digitally and then sending it off to somebody, I don't think that should really matter. But the system should. It shouldn't matter how you fill it out, but the system should be in play, and everyone should understand it, right? And so, with that in play, how because you just mentioned something there that I think is important to harp on it, where you said, is everything perfect, right? Is this exactly how I want it to be? Probably not. So to me, that means that you identify that there are some gaps and that you're reevaluating your systems and processes on some sort of a basis. How frequently do you do that? Have you done it? Like what's the process to say this didn't run exactly the way that I thought it was going to? Do I need to change, pull the plug, or what's your thought process on that?
So I kind of stagger between proactive and reactive, I guess, if you will. Like if a problem keeps coming up and it's a consistent thing, all right, let's go back and let's look at the process. Like I have a process map for everything. So that way, if a new employee comes into the business, they know exactly who's responsible for what, when to do it, and how it should be done.
Before you break that down, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but before you break that, what do you use to make your process maps? Do you draw them out on a piece of paper, or what do you use for those?
I start with pen and paper, and then after the fact, I'll upload it to different platforms. Like a really popular one is Monday.com.
Yeah.
I think Monday.com is really powerful. For the real estate industry, a transaction coordination platform is called Pre-Close Go. Okay. It's just kind of more relative to that. But yeah, I start on pen and paper, and then I move it over digitally.
Cool. And then from the process, then you do what? I'm just trying to get you back on it, because you were cooking there for a second, and I'm like, before you dive in deep, because I can tell where you're going here, because I'm the same way, man, drawing, mapping everything, dude. Yeah. I do it through Visio. That's the Microsoft product of what you're talking about. And then so you have the process map, and then where do you go from there?
So once I have the map, then you got to really you implement it, right? So when you're implementing things, it's just always good to just kind of take a sample size, right? Not saying this is exactly what we're going to do forever. I feel like try it, and try it maybe a couple of different ways, split test some things. What way worked the best? What was the most convenient, not just for us, but also the end user, the seller in this particular case, and reevaluate it. Just because something works good today doesn't mean that it is the best way or will always be the best way. So I like to kind of self-reflect at least once a quarter, probably should be a little bit more, but self-reflect and just kind of look at in my business, the last 10 deals, right? What went well and why did it go well? And more importantly, what didn't go good and why? Where was the breakdown? There was a breakdown somewhere, and what systems can we put into place to mitigate that from happening again?
Yeah, man. So in the tech industry, we call that sprint retrospective, right? Mm-hmm. So I did a whole series of podcasts on that exact topic that you're talking about right there, which is the agile process. So if you guys want to listen to that, go to the NVRA podcast, and I nerd out on that for like 6 episodes, just exactly what you just talked about, where, so in retrospective, there are 4 questions that you ask yourself in the tech industry. You say, what went right? What went wrong? What couldn't we do better? And what can we commit to, or what are we going to try differently?
Yeah.
So you leave there with actionable steps. You talk about what went right. Hey, man, like the streamline, the customer says that getting the email on which phase in the home buying process they're at, awesome. Or in the build process, awesome. Or whatever, right? And then what went wrong? Well, they wanted more pictures, or this part fell apart, or we didn't get enough information here, or we bought too much materials, we need to track better. Okay, what can we try differently? Well, what if we, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Right? So where'd you learn that? Because I thought that was like a tech industry thing. So where'd you pull that from?
So before I got into real estate, when I was I've always been kind of involved in business. I went in the military, got out, and then got right into, I was like, I don't really want to go to college. So I ended up helping my family start a gym in Virginia, in Winchester was our first location. And we pre-sold, no real experience in the fitness industry, but one of our partners had a lot of business experience. And I learned a lot from him. And we pre-sold one gym. We pre-sold 500 members. We had three employees, not including myself, so four in total that would do everything. And over the next 4.5 years, through trial and error and learning, we grew that to three locations, one satellite location, 15,000 members, and 120 employees. And through that, had a lot of business coach development and or business coaches rather. And I just kind of took the foundation of what I learned through that and applied it into this industry, and it really just kind of helped me out.
So you mean that industries are cross-functional? Is that what you're saying?
They are. Yeah, fundamentally
Wow.
very similar. Yeah.
Yeah. Imagine that. That is like one of the biggest things that I have a takeaway from doing podcasts is that the more people that I talk to about systems and processes or, business innovation, or the previous podcast that I did was the Innovari podcast. And that was all about like innovation, startups. And it was like everybody that I interviewed had a similar background or similar story where it was like, I learned that I had to capture this and then go do that, or I had
Yeah.
to do, and it's like, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, these things apply. And whether you're talking about systems and processes for a remote real estate organization, or you're talking about systems and processes for, some tech startup, this is what you need to do. You need to grab your processes right now, guys. You need to start drawing on napkins about how you want something to flow. And you said you're a military guy. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. So SOPs, are those a big thing to you?
They are. Yeah. They
Yeah.
really are. I mean, and I think that that has a lot to do with what we do, what I do now on the fix and flip things. My contractors, they don't call me and say, "Hey, what flooring do you want?" or "What cabinets do you want?" Because I have a list. They know. Let's go back to the SOP. What flooring do we always use? What cabinets do we always use? What paint do we always use? What level of fixtures do we always use? Go get them. If there's nothing that's similar, sure, then call me. But I promise you there is. And that's how my phone isn't ringing 100 times a day asking, hey, what toilet do you want? I don't care. Pick whatever the cheapest one is and go for it.
So with the paint, do you like, how do you break that? Like you said, the one that we always use, right? Do you break it down by like this is the product number that I want, these are the ones that I want, or like how much leeway? Because then you just said the toilet, right? Go get the cheapest one, right? So I assume there are certain areas where you have standardized and other areas where you have leniency. So
Right.
like how did you identify those areas?
So, good question. Paint, to answer your question, I always go with Agreeable Gray by Sherwin-Williams with white trim. And that is just like it. Like, people love it. I don't particularly like it. I think it feels kind of sterile. But again, I'm not flipping a house for me.
Right.
I'm flipping it for other people. And then as far as like stuff that I don't have leniency on, like flooring, like it has to be gray, it has to be LVP flooring, and it has to be somewhere in the $1.99 per square foot range. If they're out of one that we always use, to stay within that wheelhouse. Toilets, a toilet, a $199 toilet and a $300 toilet isn't going to make someone be like, "Oh my God, I need this house," right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, that's kind of how I think about leniency versus this is stuff that we just do not deviate from.
So you found your KPIs,
Yeah.
so your key performance indexes, right? And you have, okay, these are the things that matter most to
Okay.
people. And
Yeah.
toilets didn't make the list, man.
Didn't make the list. The old throne didn't make the list.
Gosh, I will say that I do recognize now it's not when I'm buying a house. I did not sit on a single toilet in this house before I bought it. Um, but now I do appreciate the toilets now that I'm here.
100%
It's,
post sale, huge importance. But like
yeah.
think about how I reverse engineered it. I'm buying a house, right? And what do I look for? I walk on
Mhm.
the floors. Are they nice? I open the cabinets. Do they open nice? Are the windows upgraded or are they not? Little things like that. And in little things that I just don't really, I didn't pick apart. And that's kind of
Right.
how I came up with that stuff.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I One thing that became a big part of me was the faucets.
Oh, yeah.
How much attention do you pay to faucets?
Uh,
Does that make your list?
Kind of matte
Yeah.
black. I go with the matte black finishes all the way around throughout. And a nice faucet, it really matters the most in the kitchen,
Yeah.
truthfully.
And so when you're building all these things out, right? You have a specific look that you're trying to identify because that's what it sounds like. From what it sounds like to me is your customer experience is built around a specific look that is unique to your brand, right?
Yes and no. Yeah. So I mean, I have staples for sure. The
Okay.
paint color, the flooring color, the landscaping that's non-negotiable. But whenever I buy a house in an area, the first thing that I do is I go in that neighborhood and I look what has sold in the last 6 months, and what do they do? I'm looking for the houses that sold in went under contract in 3 days for above ask. What did they do? What level of finish did they do? I'm looking for commonalities. And then I'll send that to my contractor and say, hey, still run with our SOPs on X, Y, and Z, but they did X, Y, and Z on this. Let's mirror that. And I'll budget that in because it worked.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that's part of that continuous monitoring, right? Continually trying to get better, understanding the systems and processes, how they work, sticking to your core, and
Yeah.
then understanding and learning from the metrics around you on how to do better. So, dude, I can nerd out on that right there alone for the next,
Man,
like,
me too. I
yeah,
always tell people when our coaching students, when they come to me and they have, these questions, I'm like, what did the data say?
yeah,
Yeah. Data doesn't lie, emotion does. So
yeah.
let's make all of our decision based on data and that alone, and then run with it.
It makes decisions a lot easier when you have it
Uh,
sit in front of you. And then on the other side of things is your core values. So
That's
if I don't understand my core values and I don't understand the data, then core values speaks to the emotion side. What would we do?
yeah,
What decision does it fit with who we are and what we hold near and dear to our heart? And then the data side, knowing what we hold near and dear to our heart, how can we make a data driven decision? What are
yeah,
the analytics, right?
absolutely.
So, man, I'm going to start asking everybody this question. And
Okay,
so, how has remote work changed your life?
man, it is. It's so much. I'm just going to use one example because this was like for me, it was like, holy crap, this is real. Because it was a process, right? We talked about it in the beginning. It didn't come out of the gate as uberly successful and without fault. And it's like, why didn't I do this, 10 years ago? But the biggest thing for me was I'll never forget it. I was on vacation in St. Martin, U.S. Virgin Islands, great island. If anyone's never been, go. And I sold one of our flips that I had bought fully virtual, renovated fully virtual, and sold it while I was there in St. Martin, and it was for like a 47, no, excuse me, $57,000 profit. And I was sitting on the beach doing it. I'm like, this is real. It's like this is not a fluke. This is something that is real. And right then and there, I was like, I need to create a education platform to teach people how to do this because more people deserve to be able to do this. And giving back to me is huge. And that's where I came up with the idea to start an education platform.
Dude, I love it. I love it so much because everything that you're talking about is just like giving back your life. Right?
Yeah.
So that's a lot of what it is that we do here is to just open the door to exactly what you're talking about. You want to work from a beach, you want to work from the mountains, you want to work from your son's t-ball game.
Yeah.
Like take your life back. There are ways to do it. You might have to get a little creative. You might have to amend a couple different things. It might not be the easiest thing you've ever done, but on the other side of the systems and processes, on the other side of changing the way that your business functions and flows through all that work is a beautiful life that you get to enjoy with your friends and families
Oh, yeah.
and I don't know about you, but I like being home for dinner.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
my favorite part is that when I was not working remote, I didn't always that's a real phone call. hey, are you going to be home for dinner?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I got to see traffic or if I'm taking the train or, it didn't, but it was a conversation
Oh
that,
yeah.
that didn't always end the way that my family wanted it to.
Sure. And I think it's little. I mean, it's cool to hear, working from the beach and stuff like that. But little things like that, I mean, it's huge. It creates a better home life. It creates a better relationship with yourself, your family, your significant others, and it's possible for everyone, regardless of your industry, to be able to do this. It just takes getting probably a little creative, sometimes a lot creative, figuring out who has done it, right? Don't try to do it yourself. Who do I know in my space that is virtual, and how do I get close to them? Proximity is power. How do I add value to them so that way they can add value to me? And then it's going to create just a better relationship all the way around for you, your family, and everybody.
Yeah, man. Dude, you're speaking my language, man. So before we head out, before we put a bow on this, tell people where they can find you and how they can contact with you.
Yeah. So my website is currently down. However, you can go when it is up and running here in the next week or so. You can go to www.stagmountainproperties.com. Mountain is abbreviated MTN, MTN, excuse me. So stagmountainproperties.com, or find me on Instagram, the RAI Nate, and I'm on Facebook too. Just type in Nate Hirschberg. I'm probably one of the only ones on there.
Nice. Well, Nate, dude, thank you so much for hanging out. This has been a lot of fun. And it just goes to show you that it doesn't matter the industry, that if you stick to the core values and you stick to the core business principles around remote work, that any industry can do it. And I appreciate you hanging out, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, guys, there it is. More proof, more social proof that it doesn't matter your industry, that you can do this and we can help you. So if you're looking for what Nate and I were just nerding out on for the last 40 some minutes, hit me up. Go to capitalpresence.com. You can take a look at some of the free resources that we have available to you. You can take a look at our YouTube channel where we talk about how to take the first step in designing some of these systems and processes to make sure that you never miss dinner again, that you're at every single T-ball baseball game that you want to do, or if you want to be like Nate and go work from St. Martin, which is a beautiful island, I do recommend you go. Been there twice. It's fantastic. And you can take your computer on with you, work there, and then, maybe never leave. Come back if you want, but you might not have to. So, guys, thanks for hanging out. Appreciate your time as always. You can check us out at the Work Wherever podcast. We're on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. We are building a new website. It'll be our new home. It'll be goworkwherever.com. So be on the lookout for that. Until next time, guys. See ya.